No one stayed at home. The old mistress was left alone on the farm. Probably she had never asked them to remain with her. "Think you, Rödlina, that I would ask them to stay here with me when they can go out in the world and have things comfortable?" she would say as she stood in the stall with the old cow. "Here in Småland they have only poverty to look forward to." But when the last grandchild was gone, it was all up with the mistress. All at once she became bent and gray, and tottered as she walked, as if she no longer had the strength to move about. She stopped working. She did not care to look after the farm, but let everything go to rack and ruin. She didn't repair the houses, and she sold both the cows and the oxen. The only one that she kept was the old cow, who now talked with Thumbietot. Her she let live because all the children had tended her. She could have taken maids and farm hands into her service, who would have helped her with the work, but she couldn't bear to see strangers around her, since her own had deserted her. Perhaps she was better satisfied to let the farm go to ruin, since none of her children were coming back to take it after she was gone. She did not mind that she herself became poor, because she didn't value that which was only hers, but she was troubled lest the children should find out how hard she had it. "If only the children do not hear of this! If only the children do not hear of this!" she sighed as she tottered through the cow house. The children wrote constantly and begged her to come out to them, but this she did not wish. She didn't want to see the land that had taken them from her. She was angry with it. "It's foolish of me, perhaps, that I do not like that land which has been so good for them," said she, "but I don't want to see it." She never thought of anything but the children, and of this that they must needs have gone. When summer came she led the cow out to graze in the big swamp. All the day she would sit on the edge of the swamp, her hands in her lap, and on the way home she would say: "You see, Rödlina, if there had been large, rich fields here, in place of these barren swamps, then there would have been no need for them to leave." She could become furious with the swamp, which spread out so big, and did no good. She could sit and talk about how it was the swamp's fault that the children had left her. This last evening she had been more trembly and feeble than ever before. She could not even do the milking. She had leaned against the manger and talked about two strangers who had been to see her, and had asked if they might buy the swamp. They wanted to drain it, and sow and raise grain on it. This had made her both anxious and glad. "Do you hear, Rödlina?" she had said. "Do you hear they said that grain can grow on the swamp? Now I shall write to the children to come home. Now they'll not have to stay away any longer, for now they can get their bread here at home." It was this that she had gone into the cabin to do. The boy heard no more of what the old cow said. He had opened the cow house door and gone across the yard, and into the dead whom he had but lately been so afraid of. It was not so poor in the cabin as he had expected. It was well supplied with the sort of things one generally finds among those who have relatives in America. In a corner there was an American rocking chair. On the table before the window lay a brocaded plush cover. There was a pretty spread on the bed. On the walls, in carved wood frames, hung the photographs of the children and grandchildren who had gone away. On the bureau stood high vases and a couple of candlesticks, with thick spiral candles in them. The boy searched for a matchbox and lighted these candles, not because he needed more light than he already had, but because he thought that this was one way to honour the dead. Then he went up to her, closed her eyes, folded her hands across her breast, and stroked back the thin gray hair from her face. He thought no more about being afraid of her. He was so deeply grieved because she had been forced to live out her old age in loneliness and longing. He, at least, would watch over her dead body this night. He hunted up the psalm book and seated himself to read a couple of psalms in an undertone. But in the middle of the reading he paused, because he had begun to think about his mother and father. Think that parents can long so for their children! This he had never known. Think that life can be as though it was over for them when the children are away. Think if those at home longed for him in the same way that this old peasant woman had longed. This thought made him happy, but he dared not believe in it. He had not been such a one that anybody could long for him. But what he had not been, perhaps he could become. Round about him he saw the portraits of those who were away. They were big, strong men and women with earnest faces. There were brides in long veils, and gentlemen in fine clothes, and there were children with waved hair and pretty white dresses. And he thought that they all stared blindly into vacancy, and did not want to see. "Poor you!" said the boy to the portraits. "Your mother is dead. You cannot make reparation now, because you went away from her. But my mother is living." Here he paused and nodded and smiled to himself. "My mother is living," said he. "Both father and mother are living." End of The Old Peasant Woman. Read by Lars Rolander.